Hi, and welcome to GCs in the House, a podcast spotlighting general counsels. I'm your host, Lena Guo. In my conversations with GCs, we discuss how they got in the top legal seat, obstacles that they had to overcome along the way, and how they are tackling new challenges. Hello and welcome. Today's guest is Scott Samuels, Executive Vice President, Chief Legal Officer, and Corporate Secretary of Geron Corporation, a publicly traded commercial stage biopharma company aiming to change lives by changing the course of blood cancer. Scott attended Cornell for undergrad and earned his JD from George Mason University. He started out in private practice at Mintz Levin and made partner before making the transition in-house. Scott is now a seasoned life sciences executive who has built out legal and compliance functions. Based out of the greater Boston area, Scott shares his career journey, including how to make the transition in-house and how to scale effective teams within a short period of time. Thanks again for joining and on to the conversation. Hi, Scott. So nice to have you join me on the podcast today.
Thank you, Lena. Really happy to be here. Thanks for asking me.
Absolutely. We've known each other for a few years now, and you have such an impressive track record as a seasoned GC. I thought it would be really interesting for folks to hear your story. Currently, you are the CLO and Corporate Secretary of Geron Corporation, and you are based out in Boston. But you've held other CLO roles prior to this, and I wanted to kind of get folks to understand a little bit about, how you ended up as a general counsel, and to begin with, how you even ended up as an attorney. So to start, can you tell us a little bit about where you grew up and how you decided to even become a lawyer?
Yeah, thanks so much for asking, Lena. I actually think that understanding where people come from, both literally and figuratively, is really important to understanding what makes them tick. So I grew up in a rural part of northeastern Pennsylvania near Scranton, which people might know from the Office TV series or more recently Joe Biden. There are lots of Scranton jokes for sure. From there, I left as a young teenager to go to boarding school in Massachusetts, then on to college in upstate New York and law school in the DC area. So a little bit of a sort of northeastern experience, didn't venture too far out of the mid-Atlantic and New England. As for becoming a lawyer, for me, it actually ended up just being a practical decision, which I think is the way a lot of lawyers are wired. I was a philosophy major in college, which is not the most practical of majors, as you might imagine, but I think it was really helpful in shaping how I think through issues. And I was also very heavily involved at college in our daily newspaper, spending up to 5 nights each week in the newsroom, and ultimately becoming the editorial page editor my senior year, which was also helpful in shaping how I summarize and think and write about issues. I actually didn't have a plan to go to law school when I started college. Like a lot of kids, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was just still exploring. But when I got to my senior year and I needed to figure out what was next, I felt like I had sort of two good options, either journalism school or law school. And I ended up choosing law school with the plan actually of becoming a lawyer who represented media companies. And I actually started my legal career that way before transitioning into biotech.
Wow. So how did you end up in the biotech industry? I mean, you've been in it for a very long time. I presume it has something to do with your private practice because you were at Mintz Levin for almost two decades. Can you tell us a little bit about that practice?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly what happened. So I was at Mintz for 17 years, which is a really long time to take before figuring out how much fun it is to be an in-house lawyer. That's for sure. I was fortunate to spend all of those years at one firm, Mintz, as you mentioned, which at the time I joined was a relatively small Boston firm with just one office in Washington, D.C. and over the course of my time there, grew into the national firm that it is today. It was a really great place to learn how to practice law with wonderful, caring partners as mentors. I started in the corporate practice. I kind of knew that was I didn't want to do litigation. I wanted to do corporate law, working, as I said, initially on matters for their media clients and some of their technology clients. And a place like Mintz allows their junior corporate associates to work on all different types of matters. So I did everything I could, from sort of general corporate company formation to venture capital, M&A, public company work. And I would say over time, I would just gravitated to working with the firm's biotech clients, which the firm is really, continues to have a strong life science practice, because frankly, that's where much of the work was flowing. And as you know, as a junior associate, you follow where the hours are. But I really actually enjoyed it the more and more I got into it, even though I didn't really take too much science in college. And as I became more senior, up through the ranks, senior associate, I developed an expertise in securities law, capital markets, public company representation, and by that time, I would say most of my clients, the clients that I was working with, were in the biotech industry.
Sure. And so after 17 years in the law firm world and having made partner, what ultimately led you to make a pivot into a career in-house?
Yeah, that's a really good question. As I said, it took me, I guess, longer than some people to figure it out. After being a partner for several years, I started to think about what I enjoyed most about my practice, and also conversely, what was less appealing, to be honest. And I looked ahead and thought about whether I really wanted to stay on the same track for the remainder of my career. And for me, I most enjoyed getting to know my clients and their business, and counseling them through various transactions and challenging situations. And so I was looking for a deeper dive into a business, into its management team, into its mission, rather than the more typical practice of a corporate transactional lawyer, with who's often parachuting in for one deal and then moving on to the next for a different client.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And often going in-house means being closer to the business and just kind of seeing how the sausage is made, so to speak. Um, it's not easy for partners at law firms to make that transition in-house, and you were able to make your first in-house move to Ariad Pharmaceuticals. How did you land that role, and what was that transition like?
Yeah, thanks for asking. It can be tricky, and I often get questions from people looking to make that transition, and I'm very happy to talk to people and help them, because a lot of people help me along the way. I would say initially I spent time looking for open roles at biotech companies in the Boston region, given my background and my network. But like so many people, looking to make that transition from the law firm into an in-house environment, I found that many, if not most companies, really wanted people who had already had in-house experience. And, I suspect that that's still the case today. Although I have to say, as an aside, given my long tenure in the law firm, that I'm one GC out there who is happy to hire people straight out of law firms, and I've been able to find ways over the years to make it work well. So there are some GCCs out there who are open to that type of transition. In any event, I decided to take a closer look at the clients I worked with and think about whether they might benefit from someone with my experience, even if they didn't have an open role posted. I was, also open to taking on sort of an assistant number two type role, as I've always viewed career development, a little bit as a ladder that you need to work your way up. So, looking to kind of make my own opportunities, I ended up having lunch with the GC of one of our public company clients, which, as you said, was Ariad. and they did not have a securities lawyer on the team at the time. And we just got started talking about whether there might be an opportunity for me to come work with his team. And that one thing led to another, and I joined, first as an assistant general counsel, and then became the company's acting general counsel when he moved on to another opportunity. So I really think, looking sort of at clients and relationships that you already have is a really valuable path.
Absolutely. That's great advice. And then you made another difficult transition, which was from AGC into your first GC role. So how were you able to how were you able to land that role, and
Yeah,
what was
that's
that
a good.
transition like?
Yeah, I mean, well, first, just transitioning in-house. A lot of people say it's really hard for
Hmm.
people who are in law firms to transition in-house, but I actually didn't. I didn't experience that. Maybe it's because I had so many years in private practice and had sort of, broad set of experience and the confidence and that helped give me a good sense of business judgment. For me, actually, the most challenging part of the transition was for the first time in my career, I had a boss. If you think about it in a company, it's a very hierarchical structure. I had a single person that I reported to and I was accountable to, and I had to really make sure that I had a good relationship with that person and also with the people who reported into me. And that's really different from being an associate or even a partner in a law firm. Even where you're managing people and you're managing projects, it's just not structured that way. So that was, I would say, not difficult, but not something I expected.
That's a great
um,
point. Not
yeah,
something that a lot of people think about when they make the transition, but it is a very big difference in terms of the
yeah,
structure.
yeah. You have to get along and make it work. And as for the first GC role, apart from the acting GC role that I had Ariad, that came once Ariad was acquired. And I have to say it's quite an interesting experience to be at a company that has a successful exit. I know you know this, but maybe some of your listeners might not. When a biotech company, especially, or any company, I guess, has a successful exit, all of a sudden the phones start to ring from people like you, which is great, by the way. I really appreciate that, and also from companies who are looking to hire talent. And I was really fortunate to get many of those calls, including one from someone who I had worked with at Ariad, who was now at another company that had recently completed its IPO and was looking to hire its first GC, and that was Beijing.
And you had an incredible time at Beijing from our previous conversations. I mean, you went from being the company's first in-house attorney to heading a global team of over 100 in 5 short years. So, how did you navigate that type of rapid growth? And what advice do you have for GCs learning to scale for the first time?
Yeah, great questions. Really great. I have to say that building the legal and compliance team at Beijing was probably my favorite thing that I did, during my 5 years there. I really love that team, and I still keep in touch with many of them, including those who have moved on to other opportunities. My goal going in and during my time there was to build one of the best teams in biotech. And I guess I'm not being modest here, but I really think we did that. We had such a great team, and I say we built the team because I really couldn't have done it without the amazing group of attorneys that reported into me. And they took on increasing levels of management responsibility as our team grew bigger and bigger, and they really became great leaders in their own right. So for me, it goes back to something I said at the beginning of this podcast, which is you really need to understand who people are and where they're coming from. And even at the very during the very beginning when I was hiring my first people and throughout, I spent a lot of time seeking out, interviewing, and working really hard to land, what I thought were really the best people at all levels. And even when we became a much larger team, kind of to the chagrin probably of our HR team and maybe some of the colleagues on the legal team, I still like to interview each new candidate, after they had been through the rest of the interview panel and sort of had been proposed as the finalist, because I really wanted to just kind of talk to them and do a check to see if that person would be a good fit for our team. And also, I think importantly, to demonstrate that, ours was the kind of legal team and the kind of company where the GC would really be interested and invested in you. And that's kind of the approach I took. So it may not be something you want to hear, but in the first few years, we did this largely through word of mouth by hiring people who either we or others in our company had worked with before. And of course, that's always the best way I find to get good candidates, because we had a good understanding of their values, their integrity, their work ethic. They were recommended by someone else. And I made sure I hired leaders, not just my direct reports, but as we grew, as the company became more, or the team became more structured, people in mid-level positions as well, who really shared my vision of developing people and caring for the team. And we spent a lot of time focused on team culture, on values, on building, trust throughout the organization. So that was that. To me, those are some of the key ingredients, if you will. And as far as scaling the team, as you said, we did it quickly. It didn't happen all at once. We did do it over the course of 5 years, but we hired first in the areas with I would say, the most need, which is initially, as a small company when I joined, it was just a few hundred people in the whole company, was contracting and IP, which you would expect for a small biotech company. And then as we transitioned from clinical to commercial stage, of course, we hired commercial attorneys and compliance professionals. And as we started to grow internationally, outside of US and China, we expanded the team geographically too, with a team in Europe and later on, in other parts of Asia. And so, you can imagine, once you're trying to cover the globe, by necessity, the team starts to get pretty big. And as far as the US team, I would say one big advantage we had at BeiGene was that the company had offices in all the key biotech hubs, Boston, San Francisco, New Jersey. So we were really able to draw from the talent pools in those regions. And even before COVID, we took advantage of remote hiring, starting with, a really fantastic group of attorneys who were in North Carolina. So, I would say we just had maybe the right circumstances, and we were able to draw talent from so many parts of, around the US and around the world, really. And then, one other point I guess I would make is that, first we focused on building out depth within the team, because we really didn't want people to get burned out. So we wanted to make sure we had a deep enough bench to cover, the various work that we had on our plate before expanding into new specialties, which eventually we did, things like specialized, attorneys who handled BD licensing or employment or litigation. When you get a larger team, you have the kind of luxury of bringing some of that work in-house. And I would say the last thing is that we had a really strong legal operations team, which I think is a really key ingredient that helped us leverage technology and processes so that we could scale the amount of work that we could handle. To me, that was really one of the most critical parts, finding ways to work smarter and not harder, as they say, and ways to really increase our overall capacity without just continuing to add headcount. Of course, we added a lot of headcount, but the pressure, as you know, is always to just keep adding more and more people. And at some point, you have to scale without adding bodies.
Sure. No, those are all really, really great nuggets of wisdom and advice. As a first time GC, when you joined Beijing, where did you learn? uh, Did did someone else kind of pass along these bullet points to you, or where did you learn how to best build out your team, right? Or look to hire, as you mentioned, to hire leaders, to interview everyone. Like where did or was this intuitive for you? Like where did you learn this?
Yeah, I just figured it out. Well, I didn't have a playbook by any means. It hadn't happened at Beijing before. I wasn't there, when it happened at Ariad, and I certainly didn't have that experience in the law firm.
Right.
I would say even having mentors in the legal community. I mentioned the person who I went to work for at Ariad, who has been an amazing mentor for me. He's still a GC in the Boston area, and somewhat of a legend in his own right. A lot of people have worked with him and for him. Um, Looking to see how other people did it, talking to people, having lunches, having coffee. Um, just trying to, that was part of it, but I think part of it was, also, as you said, kind of organic. Trying to evaluate what the needs of the business were. I was fortunate to be, again, I would say it's a sort of confluence of very fortunate events. I was fortunate to be at a company that was growing very rapidly, and frankly, in my first few years there, was willing to invest in building out the legal team. And I never really got any pushback when I said I wanted to hire people or spend money on outside legal resources. I think there was an awareness that the company was growing very quickly, and we had to scale and build the team very quickly. So not everyone has the luxury of being in that kind of environment. I
I
would
was
say
gonna
most
say,
people don't.
this day and age, that's like music to every GC's ears.
Yeah. So yeah, and it's not that way anymore. Once companies become more mature, and even at my current company, it's not that way. So maybe I just got lucky.
Well, so what advice do you have then for an attorney looking to become a GC, particularly in the life sciences industry?
Yeah, sure. Another great question. I think everyone's colored by their own experience, and certainly I am, but my way is not the only way. I have lots of friends now who are very successful GCs who followed a different path than I did. Obviously I was in a law firm for many years. And for me, that really helped me to get a wide variety of experience. As I said earlier, enough so that I kind of, I had the confidence to stand in front of a board and an executive team and offer not just legal but also business advice, which I think is a harder thing to do for people who just don't have those years of experience. And the another thing I would add is I mentioned sort of seeking out opportunities. I often suggest to attorneys looking for a GC role that they look at companies who have recently gone public and need to hire their first GC. And I would say that that's been maybe a little bit harder in recent years, but I think people are pretty excited about some of the recent deal activity, and it's still something that I would do. I think it's a really important source of new GC roles. And
Hmm.
the other thing I would add is that networks. I mentioned networks, and leveraging those networks is really critical. Part of being a senior associate and a partner in a law firm is you need to develop those networks because of the pressure to develop business. And so from my experience, I was fortunate to have a really strong network that I could leverage. And as we've discussed, so many opportunities come from word of mouth and being recommended for a role by someone who knows you. I mean, that's how I got the role at Beijing. That's largely how we grew our team at Beijing, how I got my first role at Ariad. So I think that I can't underestimate the importance of being recommended for a position, and I'm sure you see that in your role as well.
Oh, absolutely. I think especially in the life sciences industry, it's such a small community. Legal in of itself is already a small community, but within life sciences, even smaller. So it's certainly really important to build a strong reputation, and that is really kind of the best way to land a new opportunity is through referrals and word of mouth.
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing I would just add is, don't be afraid. I mean, it depends where you are in your career, of course, but I would say don't be afraid to take, you know, a number two role or a more junior role, and look for ways to work yourself up the ladder. I think that's a really viable role for and a viable path for many people. I think that the key point there is you really have to make sure if you're in that number two or junior role that you get the experience in that role that makes you a credible GC candidate, in the
Hmm.
future. But that's what I did. I've seen other people do it. I think it can sometimes be challenging to move straight into a GC role from the law firm.
Definitely. That is a really tough transition, especially I think as you become more senior at a law firm too. Then it's of course then with title and leveling that can become challenging as well.
Yeah.
The life sciences industry as a whole has faced a lot of headwinds this past year. Can you tell us a little bit about your current company, Geron, and what some of the legal and business challenges that you and your team are currently grappling with?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. I have to say I'm having a really great time as the chief legal officer at Geron. I've been there now for 14 months. It's been quite a ride. We received our first new drug approval just 4 months ago this summer.
Congratulations.
Yeah, very exciting. And we're now a commercial stage company. So you can imagine how busy it's been, over those
Sure.
14 months for our team. Preparing, doing everything that we need to do to prepare for launch. So, in addition to hiring, I've done some hiring, adding, commercial and compliance talent to the team during that period. We also, I couldn't have done it myself, right? I'm a corporate lawyer, so I'm very, very happy and fortunate to have really good people that surround me here at Geron and have surrounded me in my other roles. I think it's really critical to find those people and recognize and empower those people because you can't do it by yourself, that's for sure. So I would say that in addition to just building out, all the policies and processes and everything that you need for a commercial stage company, one of our challenges, as a team, but and also as a company has been just managing the growth in the organization. We've probably doubled in size. And I would say that the biggest way that manifests itself, Lena, is just there's a lot of new people coming into the organization who bring a wide variety of ideas, and that's exciting, new ideas on ways of doing things. But a lot of times they think that, they all think that the way they did it before is the best way to do it. And so you have a lot of different ideas, and everyone thinks their way is the best way, and really just figuring out, what's best for us at Geron. And you can imagine as a legal and compliance team, people have ideas about, or this is the way, we did it at our company, so why don't we do it that way here? And, it's important that we listen, but that we, as a legal and compliance team sort of set our own standards and determine our own level of risk tolerance in a way that's appropriate for our company. So those I would say have been some of the key challenges. The other thing I think I mentioned earlier, we're really just starting as a legal and compliance team to look at ways to incorporate legal operations into our practice. we're a team of 12, so I think we're kind of at the point where we need to start figuring out how we can scale our capacity without just continuing to add to headcount as the company continues to grow.
Absolutely. And what an exciting time, as you mentioned, now that the company's really focusing on the commercial aspect. There's a lot of work to be done. And given that BeiGene was also a public commercial stage biotech company, in what ways does it feel, does your current time at Geron feel very similar, and what ways does it feel very different from that experience?
Yeah, good question. I would say the similarities, something I actually sought out. I really like this stage of a company's development where they're transitioning from clinical to commercial stage. I think it's, especially in legal and compliance, to me, it's a really exciting time, an interesting time. There's a lot of challenging issues. It's obviously very intense. But you get to build things, and that's what I most enjoy doing. So I would say, the companies, or at least my time with the companies, has been very similar. The companies were sort of in a similar transition period, launching their first drug, and they're both oncology companies. They both have blood cancer drugs. That's just kind of by coincidence, probably. It's not that I seek out hematology companies, but I'm certainly familiar with this. So yeah, I would say in that respect, they're pretty similar. The other similarity is that in both situations, I would say our management team has been spread out, given the geographic breadth of the company. At Geron, since COVID, we've really adopted kind of the hybrid approach, where we're not making people go back into the office. And so, that has its advantages and challenges, as you can imagine, especially being on the senior management team. And, we do what we can, as often as we can, to get together in person, and of course by Zoom. I would say at BeiGene, that was multiplied, probably exponentially, because in addition to being spread out in the U.S., we as a management team, we were spread out globally, in Europe and in the Far East. So I would say was one huge difference. And just sort of, the other big difference, just sort of on the same theme, is that BeiGene just became, a very, very large, very global, and a very, I would say, fully integrated company. So what I mean by that is, during my time there, we, under the CEO's sort of leadership and vision, insourced most of the activities of our operations as a biotech company, which, traditionally biotech companies outsource so many things. But clinical development, when I started, was all outsourced to CROs, and over the course of my time there, we brought almost all of that work in-house, all the clinical trial work, all the clinical development work. Manufacturing, I think maybe today more biotech companies, especially in certain areas like cell therapy and gene therapy and whatnot, may have their own manufacturing facilities, but we had our own manufacturing facilities in Asia, and now BeiGene has a facility that they just opened in the U.S. as well. So really just becoming kind of a small pharmaceutical company, if you will, and having all those capabilities in-house. At Geron, we have no intention of doing that. We have no vision of becoming that size company, or tackling everything. We're a couple hundred people. We're continuing to grow, but it's very different in that respect, both the sort of the size and scale of the company, and the geographic reach of the company.
That makes sense. And it's, as you mentioned, you're kind of going back to building stage, which Sounds like a really, really exciting time. And so at the end of the day, what do you like to do to decompress? I know you recently came back from a biking trip in California.
Yeah, we had a great time. First backroads trip. I guess I don't know if I can show for them, but yeah, great opportunity to do some biking and drink some good wine in Napa and Sonoma. So that was fun. And I think it's really important to take those breaks. I tell my team that. Some of them listen to me, some of them don't.
Mhm.
But I think it's important to be in an environment and in a company where they allow people to take those breaks and actually use their vacation. I think it's really important. Um, as far as decompressing, if you had asked me that question a few years ago, I probably would have said not much
Mhm.
because I don't know, I was busy working. I was sort of, my life was my work, and I would say since COVID, I think that many of us are really more focused on our health and well-being. I know I certainly am. I make it a priority to exercise, both strength and cardio, to eat healthy, to sleep. Um, I block my calendar actually so that I can do these things.
That's
Well,
great.
maybe not sleep. I don't block my calendar so that I can sleep, but but yeah, I think it's important to carve out time in your day to do those things, and sometimes it has to happen during the day. It can't all happen on the weekend. Um, so those I think are important. Um, I like to be outside. It's something just about the fresh air and nature that maybe it's where I grew up, and we talked about sort of my upbringing, or the places that I've lived. I really enjoy being outside, whether it's on the water, here where I live in the Boston area, or outside playing tennis, or hiking or skiing. I always kind of enjoy the fresh air. I think that's important. And then I don't know if it's decompressing, but I don't view it as work. I actually like spending time out in the biotech community with
Mm,
being with friends and colleagues, and meeting new people, and helping people, because I'm just really appreciative of all the people who have helped me, during my journey. So I actually enjoy just, I'm a big advocate and participate in our local biotech association here in Massachusetts, MassBio, and we have a great network of GCs in the Boston biotech community that I've been very active in, and so I find that enjoying. I find it also really helpful. I just think those networks are really critical to our happiness and to our success.
100%. And I think to everything you said, it's a way of paying it forward, but also just to stay connected in within the life sciences community. And yeah, there are some really, really great folks in that community out there in Boston for sure. Well, thank you so much, Scott. Really appreciate this time, and for your sharing your experience and insights and your career journey with me and with listeners. I'm excited for Geron, and best of luck in terms of continuing to scale and taking the company's product commercial.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lena. I really appreciate you letting me participate this in your podcast here. I think I really enjoyed it, and I think it's a really great service that you're providing for people, and I'm really happy to have the opportunity to contribute. So thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to GC's in the House. I hope you enjoyed this episode and will join me next time for an in-depth discussion with another general counsel. I welcome your feedback and recommendations for guests. You can reach me at lguo@mlaglobal.com. Please also reach out if you have any questions or comments about today's episode. Until next time.